So good for you to be able to join Bible study once again this week. And we are just continuing even from our theme of last week, just looking at arise and build in confidence. And last week we was just to give a little recap, we was the theme last week was from Ezra chapter 3 and verses 10 to 12, and we was talking about when the builders completed the foundation of the Lord's temple, the priests put on their robes and took their places to blow their trumpets, and the Levites, descendants of Asaph, clashed their cymbals to praise the Lord, just as King David had prescribed. With praise and thanks they sang this song to the Lord. And we was talking how that there was many different shouts. There was the shouts of those who had seen the original temple, and there was a shout of those who had just seen this new temple for the first time. And in this lesson on this month's theme, Arise and Build in Confidence, we was just also talking about the figures of Ezra, Nehemiah, Zerubbabel, and Jeshua, also known as Joshua. And that how they each had a unique role to play in the return of the people of Judah to Jerusalem after 70 years of exile. We was also talking about the picture we are presented with across these books, which is that it was one of very challenging times. In the text read, we could think this building went up without much challenges. We could think that the walls went up without much challenges. But when we read the books, we actually understand that there was numerous challenges that they faced. They were now strangers returning to a land that was familiar to them before they went into exile, but everything had changed. And I was talking about a home left unattended provides easy pickings for looters and invaders. And this is exactly what had happened. The neighboring nations had invaded the land and also settled in the land. They experienced a lot of hostility from these inhabitants who became the new settlers. And a lot of their practices that they were familiar with had been eroded. Threats, conspiracies, and plots were formed to discourage them, to discourage the people, and to murder key leaders. And also we was reflecting just on like what these people returning back to their land had experienced in the land in which they were taken captive into. Psalms 137, by the rivers of Babylon, where we sat down, yea, we wept when we remembered Zion. And so I was just mentioning this simply because they were leaving the land that they were exiling, which was Persia. It was not the land of their nativity. It was a land in which there was many different nations, cultures, different practices, and it was a strange place to them. And they hoped to return to a land that seemed more familiar to them. But when they returned, it was as strange, almost as it seemed, as the land that they were coming out of captivity. We talked too about hope. History has taught us that when people are removed or displaced from their communities, they mourn and are in remorse for what has been lost, whilst trying to keep hold of traditions they know. We reflected upon how many different nations across the world, they are displaced, whether it's through war, through famine, through different, crimes, sometimes crimes of humanity. But they keep hold as much as they can of the customs and the practices that were familiar to them. We was talking about hope keeps in view the purpose of what we put our efforts into. Confidence is what we need to keep moving forwards. It's an inner peace and assurance that you're moving in the right time, in the right direction, at the right pace to achieve the next milestone. Even in Romans 8, but if we hope for what we see not, then do we with patience wait for it. Romans 8:25. And mention too that it's not about going as fast as you can either, or about knowing all the facts. Because in Ecclesiastes chapter 9, verses 11 to 12, it says, Again, I saw that under the sun, the race is not to the swift, nor the battle to the strong, nor bread to the wise, nor riches to the intelligent, nor favor to those with knowledge, but time and chance happen to them all. And so this confidence race that we're in is not about how swift we can do it, but it's about being persistent. It's about being diligent. And as we just move into this week's Arise and Build in Confidence, in 1 Corinthians chapter 3 and verses 9 to 10, it says, "For we are God's fellow workers. You are God's field. You are God's building. According to the grace of God which was given to me as a wise master builder, I have laid the foundation, and another builds on it. But let each one take heed how he builds on it." And so even in the New Testament, we see another builder, a great builder. We see Paul, who was one of the late apostles. He was not around at the same time as the other disciples, but he was a builder that sort of came onto the scene quite late. But though he was a builder that came onto the scene quite late, he was a builder that came with many talents. And he talked much about these talents that he had, about how he was, a Pharisees of the Pharisees, of his history and his practices. But what we can see from Paul is that Paul was very much of what somebody you might have, if you was to liken it to another industry, to liken it to another field, he was an entrepreneur in his time. He was one who was wanting to break boundaries. And indeed, that was the anointing that was placed upon him, because Jesus says that I have appointed him. I've appointed him for this mission. I've appointed him that he can preach the gospels into nations that the other disciples wasn't given the unction or the authority to, but Paul was given that authority to. And so this is why Paul went to places, as extreme as Malta, and to Italy, and to many places, to Corinth, to Macedonia, because he had the authority, he had the ministry of preaching to the Gentiles. And so Paul says, "For we are God's fellow workers." You are God's fellow workers too. You are God's field. You are God's building. We are all part of this great building. And it's important for each and every one of us that when we are building, is that we are building to a standard. Amen. And so even when we look today at the many different industries, whether it is the steel works, or whether it be in the carpentry, whether it be in building with bricks, or with building with steel, building with mortar, whatever it is, there's standards. Sometimes we go to buy something from the store and we look on, whether it's from one of the DIY stores in the UK, that's Wix and Homebase and B&Q, and there's many others too. But sometimes we look on the back of certain types of products that might be boxed or maybe come in a bag, and we might see on the back of it BSI, meaning that it's actually approved according to the British standards. And that when certain types of work is carried out, whether it is plumbing work or electricity work or gas work, those people in those professions have to show that they have the confidence of the people that's employing them to do the work, that they have the confidence that they can do the work to a standard. The same thing we see not just in whether it's in plumbing or in building works, but we also see in many other fields too. Human resources, in law, in teaching, in the NHS, we see standards that each one of these professions, they have to achieve in order to be able to practice that field. And so it's important, even to that as Christians, that as people of God, whether we are working in our careers, that we do things to a standard, but also when we do it in church. Why should we leave those standards at the door when we come into church? Why should we leave those standards just in the workplace and not employ or utilize these standards inside God's house? But hasn't indeed God equipped us with these tools outside so that we can use them inside? And so it says even in Nehemiah chapter 4 and verses 1 to 6. And this was even as the Jews, so excuse me 1 minute, is that even as the Jews were even trying to rebuild the wall, and they were being oppressed and distressed by Sanballat, Tobiah, and all of those that were with them. Nevertheless, they worked. And it says in Nehemiah chapter 4 and verses 1 to 6, but it so happened when Sanballat heard that we were building the wall, that he was furious and very indignant and mocked the Jews. When you're building something great, expect trouble. Expect those to want to come in on the party and spoil the party. Expect those who want to come in on the party and even want to take advantage. Actually, if you're trying to build something great, and especially where money is involved, you're going to attract a lot of attention from people who are qualified and experienced and want to help you on a project. But you're going to attract a lot of attention too, just from many of those who see an opportunity to exploit. Even so, we saw even during COVID, when in lockdown, when many businesses couldn't function, we saw, and the government in the UK actually were quite generous in actually providing support. We saw many people actually take advantage of the situation of the government trying to do a good deed, whereas many used it to actually use some of their companies, which actually weren't actually doing any business at all, to actually grab the money, close down the business, and take the money. And we know the government is trying to recuperate a lot of that money. But in this situation, what we are seeing is that the likes of Sanballat and Tobiah, they are trying to frustrate the Jews. They are trying to stop the work because they don't want this great nation of Israel, of the Jews, to be restored, because, of course, it's this great nation that has a great history of doing mighty works for God. And so what they were trying to do here is to frustrate them. And they're going to frustrate them till they become furious and indignant. And they also try to mock the Jews. Your enemy is going to try, and if he can't frustrate you by threats and other stuff, he's going to mock you. And one of the mockings that they were doing, and he spoke before his brethren, the army of Samaria, and said, "What are these feeble Jews doing? Will they fortify themselves? Will they offer sacrifices? Will they complete it in a day? Will they revive the stones from the heaps of rubbish, stones that are burned?" Now Tobiah the Ammonite was beside him, and he said, "Whatever they build, if even a fox goes up on it, he will break down their stone wall." And so it's just a reminder that when we are trying to build great things for our God, that when we are building great things, even to help others, that there's going to be those around us who's not going to be seeing the end goal of what we are putting our hearts into, what we are trying to build. And this may very well be in the workplace, whether or in wherever your environment in which you are working, could be even for some charities. But this is the important bit that I wanted to get to, which is verse 6. So we built the wall, and the entire wall was joined together up to the half its height, for the people had a mind to work. And that's really important, is having a mind to work. And in having that mind to work, everybody's got to be clear about their role. This is one of the things that we knew from Nehemiah. Everybody was instructed about their positions on the wall, and about what they were to do. Some had swords, some had weapons with them for protection, but they also had tools with them to build the wall. Many of them were doing dual roles. Some of them might have just been doing singular roles. But whatever it is, each one knew their purpose on the wall. And likewise with us, we ought to know our purpose, and our function in any great undertaking. And so if you're in a position where you're not clear on what you're meant to be doing, then ask. Don't just be involved, but not involved. Don't just be employed, but not actually employed in any work. Don't just be undertaken or asked to do something, and you don't know what it is you're supposed to do. And so confidence is also knowing your function, your role. There's nothing worse, of course, than you being asked to do something and you're undertaking that work and you're not doing it well. Worse still is if you're undertaken to do something which you actually have no profession in at all. Imagine a lawyer being asked to carry out brickie work, or imagine a doctor being asked to install a central heating system. Imagine a mechanic being asked to be an accountant. And so it's important that each and everybody understands what they're employed to do and that they have the right skills to do it. So likewise in the church, whether if you're a worshipper, then worship and know the responsibilities and the roles of a worshipper. If you're an usher, then usher and do it well. Be able to greet people, be able to smile, be able to welcome them in, and to recognize that just as you greet an elderly person, it's just the same that you greet a young child. There is no difference. Jesus said, "Suffer the little children to come unto me and forbid them not, for such is the kingdom of heaven." So you see that in that situation, the disciples might have turned away the children, but Jesus stepped in to stop them. And again, if you're in the church and your role is in women's ministry, then lead women's ministry or be involved in women's ministry. Don't be absent from it. Same from men's ministry. And for all the different ministries in church, it's about arise and building. Arise means that there is a time and there is a place, and to be there on time and to be in place. To build means to carry out that work to quality, to time, to cost, to deliver exactly what that initiative, that project, the objective of that building is. Just going to look at another life here. And this is the life of Abraham. We're going to Genesis chapter 12 and verses 1 to 4. Now the Lord said to Abraham, "Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to a land that I will show you. And I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing." So Abraham went as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. We know Abraham left his people, his country, and the safety of his surroundings to go on a journey that would entail traveling thousands of miles throughout the rest of his life. Why would Abraham make such a brave decision? A question perhaps to also ask is, what did Abraham have to lose by staying where he was? We are not given any clues as to how much time Abraham had to make his decision. What we do know from scripture is God moves quickly. Abraham seemed to have no reluctance about leaving where he was. God had presented Abraham with a choice: more of the same or greatness. In life, we can choose more of the same or greatness. It's our choice. To get more of the same, you just have to keep doing the same thing, and you will hopefully continue to achieve the same outcomes. Like I said, if you do more of the same, you should hopefully achieve the same thing and hopefully continue to achieve the same outcomes. But the same outcomes is not promised. Money in a savings account will not always produce the same results. Drawing high interest rates, money in the right savings account produces great results. And by great results, I mean that it provides a good returns because the interest rates are high. But in low interest rates, it produces poor results. Well, that savings account in high interest and low interest is still a savings account. Yes, you are still gaining interest. But it's the difference in the interest and how you can use that actual interest to make your quality of life any better. In low interest, of where it's the interest rates are typically around, hovering around 0%, as we saw in the credit crunch, just after the credit crunch. Our savings account didn't achieve much, but it was great for our mortgages. Now we are in a time of higher interest rates where for our bank accounts, it's looking a bit more favorable. But for mortgages, some are actually having to consider a lot more exactly whether they will have the finances right now to continue to be able to support their mortgage, if it should increase or it should grow even more. And so that was just an example looking at interest rates. But greatness will always require doing things differently. Its rewards are not in the mediocre or settling for the norm, but greatness is in being brave to do things differently. How confident do you need to be to settle for mediocre? How much confidence do you require to just keep on doing everything the same as you have always done it? Well, how much confidence do you need to get up in the morning, every morning at 7 o'clock, to go to work, to walk into work, to do the same job that you did yesterday, delivering the same goals as you did yesterday to the same timescales? Well, if you've been doing that same job for the past 5 years and you've been achieving the same objective at the end of each day for the past 5 years, well, you don't need that much confidence because you already have the ability. You already have acquired the knowledge. You have already acquired the tools to be able to do that same function just the same. We see many young adults at different stages of life affected by low self-esteem. This low self-esteem maybe of their self-worth, their contribution, can play havoc with their confidence. And it's not just young people alone. For even adults, sometimes they can go through life and the feeling of being rejected, maybe from they're splitting from their partner, or poor health, financial instability, can affect us all emotionally and mentally. The truth also be told, some people don't like choices. Some people don't like change. Well, we're talking about confidence here, and confidence is what we need to do greatness. And so if we're going to do greatness, you must embrace change and adapt to change if you want to build great things. It's impossible to build greatness by doing it the same way all the time. But also, we must not be irresponsible. And that's another important thing. Because just like a great building, an architect will come along with a great design. And for many of us who might have been down into the city, a building I like to look at and I find quite amazing is the Shard. And there are many other buildings. We can look at new buildings, and sometimes even to go past some of the older buildings, whether it be St. Paul's or whether it be Houses of Parliament, Buckingham Palace. We can all look at these buildings and admire the great skill that went into building them. We can even look back too at some of the great buildings that were built thousands of years ago, or structures, some that can be seen from space, like the Wall of China, and even looking at the pyramids in Egypt. There are so many buildings. And it's important that we're not irresponsible. We can say that for some of these buildings, not for all, for some, there was an expectation that these buildings must be built at whatever cost, like the pyramids. And so we know that many hundreds, perhaps thousands of lives were lost trying to build these great buildings. But then we also know that from such buildings too, as like St. Paul's and Buckingham Palace, lives are costly. To lose a life is to lose talent and to lose also great workmanship. And so even today, we have standards today and we have practices today to ensure that we build things efficiently, safely, to the best cost, and to timescale. Many of us know that government, it's often the government projects that, when they're often shared with the general public, some of these great ideas, whether it's, HS2 or others, they often share a budget. And unfortunately, we keep on finding that these budgets keep on going up and up and up. And there's many factors that can affect it. These budgets going up. There are protesters. There is inflation. There is interest rates. There is also to do with the quality of the actual products that's coming out of the manufacturers. There's the cost to do with transportation, all these many different costs. And so the reason why I say this is that in building, we must build with confidence, but we also must not be irresponsible. We must, at the same time, know exactly what we are building, how we're going to build it, to be able to factor in the cost, to be able to factor in exactly the resources that we're going to need. But whilst we also do this, we must have faith. We must believe. We must have some confidence in our ability, but also have some confidence that we are doing things for God. Amen. Because doing things on our own, we may achieve much, but doing things with God, we would achieve greatness. And that's the difference. Doing things on our own, we may achieve much, but doing it with God, we achieve greatness. Doing things on our own, we may be able to do it and to please some people. Doing things with God, we will do things and build with a legacy. And this is exactly why God actually spoke to Abraham. And this is one of the reasons why I believed, Abraham left where he was. And I go back to that question, a question perhaps to also ask, what did Abraham have to lose by staying where he was? Well, I think one of the reasons why Abraham perhaps decided to leave is because God was going to create a legacy through him, that through him and out of him, God will create a great nation. That through him, that this nation will be like sand upon the seashore, like the stars of heaven. Yeah. And this is what God was saying. And so Abraham, he moved out by faith. He stepped out by faith. But let's look at another life that was challenged to do great things. Moses. When the Lord, in Exodus chapter 3, 7 to 11, when the Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt, and have heard their cry because of their taskmasters. I know their sufferings, and I have come down to deliver them, out of the land of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of the land to a good and broad land, a land flowing with milk and honey, to the place of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, the Jebusites. And now behold, the cry of the people of Israel has come to me. And I have also seen the oppression with which the Egyptians oppressed them. Come, I will send you to Pharaoh, that you may bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. Well, that's a great summary and introduction by God. Yeah, I like how these words have been penned. God gives Moses a breakdown of the situation. He gives him foresight of exactly what's happening back in Egypt. And then just suddenly, bang, like that, come, I will send you to Pharaoh, that you may bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. But Moses said to God, who am I, that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the children of Israel out of Egypt? And so Moses was showing here quite an opposite to Abraham, perhaps a lack of confidence in his ability. And so what we see Moses showing is perhaps he's actually, through his conversations with God, he's disqualifying his own abilities. He's disqualifying his own credentials. He's disqualifying his resume. He's recommending others before himself. He's showing a lack of ambition. He's allowing his failed past experiences to affect his decisions right now. And his contentment isn't the norm. Some people are excelled, and some people are excelled into greatness through no choice of their own. And this is the situation through, even with Moses. Moses is here being effectively told, come, you're the one that's going to deliver my people. No other person was approached. God didn't move on to anyone else. Even though Aaron, his brother, was on the way, God didn't say to Moses, okay, move aside. I'll let Aaron then do what you are incapable of doing, what you are saying that you're not able to do. But no, God perseveres with Moses because he sees in Moses an ability. And I'm reminded even of how God said to Samuel when choosing the next king, look not on their physical ability or their appearance, but instead look at their heart. And so God, even with Moses, he's looking at their heart. And even as us, in whatever ministry we are working with, let us look to the hearts of the people. Let's not just look at those that we have around us, who we can say, well, we've seen this person, we know this person can we know we can use this person because we've seen them being used in worship ministry, and we've seen them being used to do ushering, we've seen them being used in women's ministry. But God is actually even saying unto us, look to use those who you might not have considered before. Some of those quiet ones in the background. And so God is even reminding us, even about confidence, is that whatever we are building, even whether it be outside of work, in our homes, in church, to build with confidence. Like Joshua, to be strong and courageous. So God is confident in you. The enemy knows you have confidence in your God. Yeah. Just consider this, that if God is confident in you, and the enemy knows you have confidence in your God, then what the enemy will be wanting to do is to question your own self-confidence in your positioning. He knows that God is confident in you. He knows that you have confidence in your God. Yep. But now what he's actually trying to do, or to question you to do, is your self-confidence is to question your own self-confidence, or your own self-belief in yourself, in your ability. 2 Kings chapter 18, verse 19. And Rabshakeh said unto them, speak ye now to Hezekiah, thus saith the great king, the king of Assyria, what confidence is this wherein thou trustest? That's what the enemy is trying to do, is to get you to question your confidence, in yourself. You might have confidence in God, but do you now have confidence in yourself? I like the words of Job. For I know that my Redeemer liveth. After all that Job had gone through, he had lost his family. He has lost all his possession. He had lost some of his health. His friends had turned against him. And so Job had lost everything. But yet Job could still say, God, I believe you still have confidence in me. And even though he knew that his enemies knows that he has confidence in his God, even though they questioned his self-confidence, Job never questioned his own self-confidence. Job said, for I know that my Redeemer liveth. Know that your Redeemer liveth. When you know that your God is your Redeemer, when you know that God is your helper, when you know that you can rely upon your God, when you know that you are walking right with God, when you know you are walking in God's truth, when you know you are walking in God's word, then like Job, you can say, for I know that my Redeemer liveth. Like Job, you will have confidence in God. God bless you.
Thank you, Brother Andrew.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Thank you.
Good night as we go over the prayer meeting.
Yep.
Yep.